In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Welcome back to another edition of the Daily Memphian's Memphis Grizzlies podcast. This is your host, Grizzlies beat writer Drew Hill, joined as always by columnist Chris Herrington. Grizzlies got a big win over the Lakers last night. We record this on Thursday morning. It's early. I'm tired. I was on the road trip to the East Coast as well. Grizzlies got a win over the Sixers, and they lost in a close one to the Nets. We'll talk about all of that and more. But Chris, come on. We got to start with Ja's comments last night. He doesn't like the Lakers. I think you're on record not liking the Lakers.
100%. You thought Ja's popularity among Grizzlies fans couldn't increase, and that it didn't reach the ceiling. He broke right through the ceiling. I don't like them. I think Grizzlies fans feel that.
Yeah, no, it was a fun game and post game, I would say. Ja is now, I think, hitting a point in the season already where he's a little bit more fiery, especially after the game, than he was maybe to start the season. He was pretty fiery after that loss in Brooklyn, I think, as you would imagine. A little bit thorny, like just difficult to sort of get much out of. But then last night he had his piece and he wanted to say it very clearly about the Lakers. And that seems like it was something that had been stewing for a while. What everyone has missed, and I don't want to point this out because I don't want to be the guy that's like, hey, Ja, by the way, but like, Ja beat the Lakers last year in one of the 9 games that he was on the court.
See, I couldn't remember that. I didn't have time to look that up. I know he had played on a West Coast swing, but I couldn't remember like which game he played and which ones he did, because he got hurt on a West Coast swing, I believe.
Yes, that was one of the very few games. That was I think the last game. That was the last game that he played, was a win over the Lakers. And that was like one of the last times. No, I think it was the very last time that Ja, Dez, and Jaren all played together prior to their one appearance this season. So Ja, that had been building up, clearly.
But this was his first Lakers game in FedEx for him since that playoff bounce. And also, even all of that aside, I just think there's hate to say it, because if you're trying to hate the Lakers, you're sort of admitting that the Lakers, there's something special about the Lakers, but there is extra juice in a game against the Lakers. And there's extra juice in like John Morant, LeBron James, 2 of the biggest stars. LeBron maybe the biggest star, but 2 of the biggest stars in the game. Like, I mean, I think that alone will stoke the competitive juices in somebody like John Morant. But to the point you started with about he's been a little more fiery, not just in this game, I think that's good. I welcome that. This Grizzlies team, I know they're only 5-4. This Grizzlies team has the ability to be really good this season, and it should be really good this season. And I want John Morant, the leader of the team, to demand that they're really good this season, right? I welcome that. I want him to be mad about a 2-point loss at Brooklyn. I want him to get fired up to take a game away from the Lakers on the home floor. I think that's all good.
Yeah. Well, as we said, there's a lot to get into. Let's start with last night. What I found interesting, so Tuomas Asalo coached because Taylor Jenkins had a death in the family, so he was away from the team. And Asalo stepped up into the starting role, which you kind of knew that he was going to have a little bit, I guess, different lingo than Taylor Jenkins, because Taylor Jenkins kind of talks in the exact same manner every time he's up there. So I was really interested in hearing Asalo speak before and after the game. And one of the things he said that was really, I guess, interesting, or I found to be his best quote, was him talking about, it's kind of becoming our go-to move that we get 3 guys to play really good in one game, and it's really hard to figure out who those 3 guys are. And there it was again last night. And so really it's been take your pick. And you wrote a column about this, the Grizzlies third stringers, that loose term, third stringers,
Right. Yeah.
now stepping up and playing extremely well. Last night, Ja and Jaron both had 20, but there was Jalen Wells. And I think that, that this has become the story of the season for this Memphis team so far. That they're deep, very clearly.
Yeah.
And if they get healthy, then they're going to be really deep.
Yeah, and when I say like third stringers or third teamers, that's not intended as an insult. The reality is, when you take an NBA roster, it's a 15-man roster. You play 5 players at a time. So when you take your roster, anybody's roster, and you imagine it at full health, and especially if you go back to like first day of training camp, right? If you had taken that roster and said, okay, everyone's healthy, who are your starters? Who's your second 5? And then that leaves 5 guys left, right? And Jalen Wells would not have been in anyone's top 10 players at that point. Jay Huff would not have been in anyone's top 10 players at that point. I don't think Jake LaRavia would have been in anyone's top 10 players at that point if they're full health. Scottie Pippen was debatable because he was only the second real point guard, but he was also on a 2-way on the first day of training camp.
Yep.
And you looked at the roster and you said, well, if everybody's healthy, you're probably playing Luke Kennard and Vince Williams and Gigi Jackson off the bench. So maybe Scottie Pippen's not in that lineup. So from a depth chart perspective, they won a training camp. All 4 of those guys are third team guys. And they have been, 3 of the 4 have been top 4 in minutes played this season. And they've all been really good. Not really good every minute of every game, but relative to what reasonable expectations would have been, they've all been really good. And last night against the Lakers, 7 players in double figures, 4 of them are those 4 guys. Jake LaRavia led the team in assists. Jalen Wells led the team in 3-pointers. Scottie Pippen and Jay Huff, other than John Moran, I guess, who always leads the team in moments, probably led the team in moments, right? That was just a great collective performance from those guys.
I want to take them all one by one because I think we're at the stage. And just because I wrote about him on the trip, I want to start with Jalen Wells. First of all, the defensive numbers from Wells have been really good this season. It's a really small sample size. We'll see what happens. But I was just super impressed with those games against Milwaukee and Philadelphia because not only did he make threes and give them something on offense, like he was the guy that chased around Lillard and Maxey the entire game. Every time he was on the floor, he was the guy chasing those players. And he did a really good job on both of them. And for him to be the 39th overall pick, step in to a starting role early in the season, which he admitted he never imagined he'd be a starter at this point in his career, and be as solid as he's been is really, really impressive. And when you talk to some of his Grizzlies teammates about Jalen Wells and you talk to Jalen Wells himself, you realize that he is this very even-keeled, very smart, like he comes across as very smart basketball player that really digests what the Grizzlies are trying to do and executes it almost immediately. And it's become this awesome skill for him to learn super quickly. And it's impressed everybody on the roster. I was talking to Ja about Jalen Wells, and Ja obviously had a lot of nice things to say. And afterwards, even Ja indicated he was like, "We might have got another one here." I think the exact words he used were "king climbing." So Jalen Wells has been really great for this team, and I put him maybe, and I know you probably do too, because I think we were on the same page with what I wrote and what I heard you say on Jeff Calkins' show earlier this week, which is Jalen Wells is different than the other guys. He's just a little different because the other guys have real experience, and Jalen Wells feels like one that could be an impact player and not just a role player. Yeah.
No, if you take those 4 guys I just talked about and say, okay, where are they going to be? Not where are they, like the first day of training camp, you'd project them as third string or whatever, but where are they going to be? I mean, anybody could be anything, but realistically speaking, Jalen Wells has a much higher chance of being an NBA starter, particularly a starter for the Grizzlies at some point in the future. Now he's got some other competition, a couple guys not playing, and Vince Williams Jr. and Gigi Jackson, but he profiles as someone who could grow into that. He's starting right now because of injuries, but he could just be a quality NBA starter. There is that potential with him, and to have him, what's essentially a 4-year contract, it's a second round pick. It's just another like great find and sort of great long term signing. He was a draft pick, but you signed him to a contract signing for the Grizzlies. I think what's impressive, sort of piggyback a little bit on what you said. I think what's particularly impressive about Wells outside of the physical stuff is there's a combination there of confidence with maturity, right? And those two things aren't necessarily the same thing, right? Like Gigi Jackson, like played with a lot of confidence last season. Maturity was a work in progress. Wells, as a rookie, steps right into, he's playing with a lot of confidence for someone who doesn't have much experience, but he's playing with a lot of maturity too, as a 21-year-old rookie. And it's really impressive. I think the shooting is clearly real. Good shooters will have bad shooting games, bad stretches. We'll see where it goes. But you can't watch him play to this point and I just think this guy's a real shooter, period.
Yeah.
I think he's got a really good feel for the game in a way that makes him more. I don't think he's going to be dynamic offensively other than the three-point shooting, but he's not one-dimensional. He's not a guy who can do nothing else, right? I think he's got a good feel for the game. The defensive stuff, I'm a little interested in where that's going to go. It reminds me a little bit, he's 6'8", right? But he's playing shooting guard right now. And he's mostly guarding with like the assignments you just brought up, Tyrese Maxey and Damian Lillard, right? It reminds me a little bit of Zaire Williams, where he was like 6'8", but they sort of determined he was better defensively scaling down than guarding bigger players. And maybe that's true with Wells, where his length helps him. He's got a length advantage against those guys, and he can move around to keep track of them pretty well. I wonder how well he'll hold up if he's forced into more physical kind of matchups, if he's trying to guard, like, if he would ask to guard LeBron.
We saw him on LeBron one time last night, and LeBron scored.
It didn't go well. But I'm saying LeBron's a special circumstance. But even like, I don't know, Brandon Ingram, like good scorers who are like 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", I think that might be a tougher matchup for him. But I think he's going to be a good enough shooter that he doesn't have to be an all defensive player. He just has to be a good solid defensive player. And he's shown every indication of being that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think statistically, a debate can be had here. He's probably been better defensively this season than offensively so far. I mean, he's shooting the ball well from three, so I don't know. He made 5 threes yesterday. That might have changed last night.
I will tell you, when you look at like the lineup stuff, the lineups he's in have fared better defensively. Like the on-off stuff for him, I think is better defensively than offensively.
Yes.
I'm just sort of projecting out forward. I think the shooting is going to be the number one thing with him. But, when you talk about 3 and D wings everyone wants, there's 2 parts of that, right? There's the 3 and the D.
Yep.
And I think he showed someone who can do both.
He talks a lot to me about learning from Marcus Smart. And Marcus Smart's been kind of the guy that's taken him under his wing early this season, teaching him some of the tricks of the trade on defense. It's interesting that if he turns out to be this player that we all think he is, and he just continues to get better as they head towards the trade deadline, and Vince Williams Jr. comes back and is playing well, does that mean anything for Marcus Smart?
Oh, I think it could. I think the Marcus Smart thing, and I don't want to jump the gun on it. I think they value Marcus Smart's like veteran influence in addition to his basketball, and they don't have a lot of that on the roster. So I think any decision they might make about Marcus Smart, that's going to factor into it as well. Derrick Rose already gone on this roster, so what are we losing if we're moving Marcus Smart in terms of that kind of influence? I think on the floor, Marcus Smart's got a lot even though he's an accomplished veteran, in terms of like, what can you do for me today? What can you do for me tomorrow? He's got a lot to show about A, staying on the floor, and B, even if he's on the floor, is he really going to help you as much as Jalen Wells and Vince Williams Jr. are? And I think that's the thing the team really has to look at over the course of the season. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. All right, on to the next. You take your pick. Jay Huff or Jake LaRavia or Scottie Pippen Jr.?
The Jay Huff stuff to me is wild because not only my joke, I wrote a little next day notes thing that may be up by the time people are listening to this, but I'm constantly searching for new jokes and metaphors around Jay Huff, right? And my thing today was his game is like a restaurant that only has 3 items on the menu.
I like
You
it.
know,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, look at your video. Oh, so you got 3 pointers, you got reverse dunks, and you got blocked. That's all you got. That's all we got. But we're really good at it. We're really good at what we do. And and not only does he have these three things, they're all like entrees or desserts. So these aren't just like side items,
It's
right?
like
These are like
Cafe Du
featured attractions.
Monde,
Yeah,
They
100%.
got
It's like
beignets and coffee. That's it. They got.
sugar coffee. And you go, you sit down, and you say, "Give it to me," right?
Yeah.
And not only does he have these three things, it seems like they always come like in proximity to each other. He has this tendency to have these eruptions, right? Like he'll have a stretch like against the Lakers, like the first half he played like 4 or 5 minutes. He wasn't very good. The team wasn't very good with him on the floor. And I wondered if he would play in the second half because the game before was kind of like that, and he didn't play in the second half. And you bring him out there, and then suddenly there's a J Huff eruption. And it's like and then in span of like 2 minutes, it's like 3 pointer, block, 3 pointer, reverse dunk, 3 pointer, boom, 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 boom. It's kind of amazing the way he just comes out throwing heat sometimes.
Yeah. It's pretty fun. The reverse dunks are getting ridiculous now. Like the guy should
Yeah,
never dunk forward ever. Forget it. Don't even try to dunk forward, J Huff. Dunk backwards. But no, yeah. To your point, the explosions are so fun, and you had the combo meal, and J Huff actually got asked about like his three consecutive plays, like the grouping of three plays he had, which was a block, a 3 pointer, and a reverse dunk, all in a matter
right,
of
right,
like
right, right.
3 possessions or a minute. And he couldn't come up with a name for it. He called it the Huffecta. Since we're sticking to the restaurant thing, I think we're better off going for like like a 3 for 4, but like 3 for 30, which is Jay Huff's number. Like that's what that
Right.
is. It's like a 3 for 30 meal is basically what we've got there. But yeah, it was that was extremely fun. And Jay Huff is just a character, man. It's
Yeah.
great. Like he's such a good quote. He's funny. He makes fun of himself. Like I'll spoil a little bit of a story. It'll probably be out by the time this podcast comes out. I talked to Jay Huff about his shoes he was wearing. He has these custom hand painted shoes by his wife, who's like an incredible artist. He's been commissioned for all kinds of different art. Has done shoes in the past for like Luke Kennard and Pascal Siakam and like all types of players painting custom shoes. And the first thing he brought up when he was telling a story about meeting his wife was like, dude, I had no game in college. Like I couldn't talk to girls at all. He was just like go, and I was like, that is so perfectly Jay Huff. Like, and then he met this 6'2" uh woman, now his wife, at a Christian fellowship meeting. I'm like at the University of Virginia. I was like, this is perfect Jay Huff. And I just love that he's himself too. It just makes it that much more fun. But he's been a serious revelation for this team, and like to watch him do that against the Lakers probably felt pretty good. Now the Grizzlies hope he can do it against the Wizards and the Nuggets coming up.
Yeah, he's the perfect kind of cult hero, right? In part because he's a colorful big man. And fans like colorful big men if they do something, right? If you're bad, then it goes the other way. But like people love the late career Joakim Noah cameo with the Grizzlies. People love the late career Chris Anderson cameo with the Grizzlies. Guys like that who are
Steven
colorful
Adams.
characters. Yeah, well, he was better than that, but still, same kind of
Yes.
idea. Colorful character who also really brings something striking and unique like to the game when they get on the floor. Like fans love those guys. And like you keep waiting for like, the J Huff thing to die down, and then there's another Huff eruption.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, before we move on to the other guys, like the Grizzlies have a very good problem on their hands, which is they have three centers that all play entirely different styles of basketball,
Right.
and they get to take their pick on a nightly basis of who's working the best and throw those guys out there in the late moments of the game. They've got the power
Is
of Edie.
is
Huh?
Brandon Clark the other one you're talking
Yes.
about?
They've got
Okay.
the power of Edie. They've got the finesse and a little bit more quickness with Brandon Clark. And then they've got the shooting of Jay Huff, and I think,
Right.
and shot blocking there as well. And they get to take their pick on a nightly basis, and that is a huge advantage. And I think that was something Asalo pointed out late in the game which was, that's why Edie didn't come back in, because look at what happened. Look at the way Jay Huff was playing. How can you take Jay Huff off the court? It was the same thing with Edie in Brooklyn. Like they weren't going to take Edie off the court. He was playing really well. He didn't play as well against the Lakers. So they can kind of choose who they want. I still don't think Brandon Clark's playing enough, though, by the way.
The Clark thing is interesting to me. His individual numbers don't look very good. His you just watch him play, he is pretty clearly not what he was pre-injury. Whether he gets all the way back to that or not, I don't know. But the team has played really good basketball with Brandon Clark on the floor. And I think he has shown signs of not getting all of his hop back, but getting his rhythm back. He was only 2 of 6 last night, but in terms of rhythm and touch, and I think some of that's starting to come back. And I just think he knows how to play, especially with Jaren, especially with Ja, some of this stuff. And the team has just been really good, like when he's played. He was up to 9. He was 19 minutes last night. I think that may be a season high. I'm not sure, but I think it probably is. That's sort of a normal Brandon Clark, like career number is 19, So I'll be interested to see like if his usage and his play improves as he keeps going. But the team has still been really good when they play Brandon.
Yeah, especially Brandon and Jaren. Like it's still a combination that works. And that's something I think that this team has learned. All right, let's move on to the other guys. But first, let's take a break for a message from our sponsor.
Want to make a big impact without getting lost in a big system? Join Youth Villages to be a force for families while becoming part of one. Help make positive changes on a national scale, one community at a time. It takes a family to transform lives. Start with yours. Apply now at youthvillages.org/careers.
Scottie Pippen Jr. also does not like the Lakers. He made that pretty clear this week too. He was upset that Darvin Ham never gave him a chance, and said as much without mentioning Darvin by name after they beat Milwaukee. And then again said essentially the Lakers overlooked me. They didn't give me a shot. And so he was obviously very happy to get the win over his old team. He also had one of the moments of the night, the swipe away steal from LeBron James in transition. Took that ball away from that old man, according to Desmond Bain, after the game. But Scottie has been pretty good for this team. And I really love the Scottie and Morant lineups because I think Morant is so dynamic off the ball and so fast. He puts so much pressure on the other team to defend him that it's making these passes easy for Scottie. And some of these other guys are scoring.
That's been a little bit of a surprise to me. Not necessarily that it's been good, but that they've gone to it. Like I think if you go back to game 1, like first quarter substitution, I think they subbed into that initially, in a way that I expected not to be the case, right? I expected them to lean into Pippen and Bain and lean away from Pippen Morant, and it was transitional. They were getting to Pippen and Bain, but they gave a little time to Pippen and Morant, and that's been a staple ever since. And the lineup data on Pippen Morant lineups is really, really strong for the Grizzlies this season. I think there's maybe a little bit more growth for Pippen to come in terms of leading a lineup, playing without Morant. Then getting Bain back will sort of help that. I thought it was good against the Lakers, though. I think it was a good night for him because Ja went out, right? And they had a lead at that point, but Pippen had to sort of finish off that game as the lead point guard, and he did. I just did some math real quick while we were talking. So if you combine, he played 21 games for the Grizzlies last season, 9 this season. So it's up to 30 games for the Grizzlies. Not counting the 6 he played for the Lakers before that. 99 3-point attempts across those 30 games, 42%. And that's over 2 seasons. Maybe he's a real 3-point shooter now. And if that was something that people were not certain about him. If he's a real 3-point shooter to go with the athletic gifts he has, that's really good stuff.
He doesn't have to be 40%. Like that, that's not even what they need from him. That's the thing. That's bonus right there.
But if he can be like 35 plus, like a good 3-point shooter, it definitely helps in terms of him and Ja playing again, right? For him to be a threat off the ball as well. Just a great all around start for Scottie Pippen Jr.
Yeah, he's been really good, and to have 2 table setters the way that they do it, like it feels like the Tyus, That it feels like the Tyus and Ja dynamic. It's obviously he and Pippen's a more downhill player. He's a more aggressive on-ball defender. I'm not saying that, but just they have two guys who, no matter which player is in the game at any given point, he is going to be capable of finding teammates, and that's
Well,
a
I think
plus.
I mean, he is a different player. He's a more dynamic player athletically on both ends of the floor. He's also not as sure-handed. He's not going to lead the NBA in assist turnover ratio like Tyus Jones does every season. But I think Tyus Jones, I think to this point, Pippen's early in it. Remember the year when John Morant missed 20 something games, they were so good with Tyus as point guard. I don't think Scottie Pippen is as well suited yet to like take over as a starting point guard in an extended stretch as Tyus. I mean, that's a high bar to clear versus Tyus. But I think the upside of Pippen as a playoff player with Morant is higher. They couldn't really play Ja and Tyus together, especially in playoff basketball, because of defensively. I think Pippen's better, stronger, better defensive player and more versatile in terms of the matchups he can take on. And that probably gives him more ultimate utility, like in playoff series. Because in the playoffs with Tyus, when Ja's available and Ja's playing 38 minutes in a playoff game, Tyus got a lot less useful in that setting. I think Pippen may have a chance to hold his value in those settings more.
It's been a while since I checked the stats, but entering that game in Brooklyn, there were only six players in the NBA who had already passed 50 total assists on the season, and the Grizzlies had two of them in Scottie Pippen Jr. and John Morant. So pretty good backcourt so far for the Grizzlies, even when Desmond Bane's not been healthy and in the lineup. So I think
Yep.
those are really encouraging signs. All right, last one, and then we'll move on to some other things. But Jake LaRavia, Jake has, to me, online, and online does not reflect the greater fan base, faced a little bit more criticism than I think maybe he should be facing. Like the guy's out there doing a lot of the dirty work right now for the
Yeah.
Grizzlies, and he's really helped them in some of these games. And he's rebounding and he's passing the ball well. And as long as he's making an all right clip from the 3-point line, I think he's been pretty useful for this team, giving them some
I
good minutes.
I think there are definitely a lot of fans who developed sort of an idea about LaRavia like a year and a half into his career when he hadn't done much, but he also honestly hadn't played much at that point. And I think there was disappointment in him. As a guy they traded basically two first round picks to move up a few spots to get him. There was expectation he'd step in and help immediately. He either didn't play well or didn't play at all because he was hurt for like a year and a half. And I think a lot of opinions sort of got baked in on him based on that. And I think maybe some fans have been slow to catch up with how good he is, how well he's played this season. And part of it is that he had a good shooting night, good scoring night last night, 13 points, 6 of 11. A lot of these games, his value has not come from offense, from scoring. It's come from rebounding and defense and passing and little stuff and that glue guy kind of stuff. And I do think he's become probably as good of a player as I expected, but a different kind of good player, right? I thought he would be more of a 3-point shooter oriented kind of player. And instead, he's almost a little bit more of a John Conchar, do a little bit of everything kind of guy. But I think he's played really well, and the team has played real. He's second on the team in minutes after Santi Aldama this season.
Yeah, no, I think that you nailed it there. And I was one of those people, by the way. I was ready
Yeah,
to give up on the Jake LaRavia experiment, but you got to give the guy some credit. He plays extremely hard, and he's carved himself a role on this team, even if it wasn't the role that everybody expected, which I think is part of the reason for disappointment, because
yeah,
everybody thought he was going to be, you know, a great shooter. I remember we watched the first summer league game, and people were calling him Mike Miller.
right.
He's not Mike Miller, but he's making some winning basketball plays for the Grizzlies, which I think is pretty important. We talked about last time, Chris, that the Grizzlies had never really gotten off to like a great start under Jenkins.
Right,
Here they are now at 5-4, which is essentially what they've been every single
right,
season.
right.
Your thoughts on just the season overall and the way that it's gone so far? There's been some good and some bad. The injuries to me are very concerning, but the record and watching them play in some of these games has assured me I think that this team is pretty good.
I feel I feel even better about what the Grizzlies can be than I did before the season started. Um, I think if you look at the record in the context of again, like I just said, Jake Laravius, the top four guys in minutes played are Santi Aldama, Jake Laravia, Scottie Pippen, and Jalen Wells. So if you'd said before the season those are your top four players in minutes played, you'll be 5-4. Will you take that or not? I think everyone says yes. But when you watch the games play out, I do think the Grizzlies have left some money on the table. And they have underperformed their point differential. They're a 5-4 team. They've the same point. They have actually a better point differential than the 7-1 Phoenix Suns, and that is one team winning close games. The other team was lost in close games. To me, it's a one game thing. Like I think there's two or three games that they could have leaned into a little bit stronger. Maybe you win one of them if you do that, and so you're 6-3 instead of 5-4. It's a one game difference. But I think the fundamentals of this team are really strong. Even with all the guys they missed, they're up to six as we speak today, sixth on offense. They're second in rebounding somehow. I'm not sure how that's happened. They have the second best rebound rate. And defense, they're only like 16th, but this team, A, always starts slow on defense under Taylor Jenkins, and then it gets really good. And then B, like zero Vince Williams and not much Marcus Smart, and you missed 2 games of Jaren Jackson. And so I think the fundamentals are really strong if they can get it all together.
Yeah, I think like one area that you didn't touch on that I think they're going to continue to get better is like they keep talking about pace, 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 pace. They've been efficient in with their fast break offense so far this season, but they weren't, inside that elite tier in terms of generating fast break opportunities just yet.
Right.
And I think as the defense improves, you're going to see that improve. They're going to score more in transition, which is where they are actually at their best, which has the potential to make this team even better. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like you have to feel better about where this team stands now than maybe what you thought at the beginning of the season. But we'll see what happens with some of these injuries. We should do a
Right.
little housekeeping and update all those because I'm sure people are wanting to know. As things currently stand, Desmond Bain and Marcus Smart are week to week. Make of that what you want. I took it as it's better than a reevaluation date. How did you
Yeah.
take
No.
that? Yeah.
No, that's the same thing. To me, when that injury report came out, I didn't see it as good news, but I didn't see it as the absence of bad news. Like it was not like the worst case scenario that I feared, reasonable worst case scenario that I feared, which was going to be we'll be reevaluated in 3 weeks or we'll be reevaluated in 4 weeks or one of those things. I don't have much of a sense beyond just that week to week is open ended. Like that could be just about anything, but I don't think they put that designation on it if they're thinking that means more than a month, right? That seems unlikely to me.
Yeah. No, I would agree. As I said, um, when you put it as week to week, it suggests that if the players felt good enough to play, they could just play in the game, right?
Right.
Versus if they would have given a timeline, then they would be sitting out no matter what, waiting for that reevaluation timeline. So if Desmond Bain wakes up on Friday and goes, "Man, I feel good. I'm good to go," I would guess that he'll be out there. So I think week to week is better than. And I'm not suggesting Desmond Bain's going to be out there on Friday at all, but I
Right.
think that that's better than having to wait on some sort of update. We'll see on Ja. He was limping after the game. He wasn't moving very quickly. He went to the locker room after he thought he got fouled on the alley-oop attempt, and it did look like he got fouled, but I didn't have a great angle.
Let me
Uh,
ask you, and I don't know if you had noticed because your eyes were probably on the play, but on television you could only see the play. Did Asalo react to that? I was waiting for a coach to get teed up.
no, not that I remember. I think I was watching the play. Asala was very even keeled the whole game.
All right.
Ja was extremely frustrated early in the game with the lack of foul calls.
I think
I
Taylor
was
Jenkins might have gotten a tee in that game if he had been coaching.
probably,
Yeah.
probably. Um, yeah, when Ja got the tee for bumping LeBron with the way that game was going, I was like, all right. I mean, I get it. It's an intense moment. Like, Ja's trying to make a point there and stand up because he was upset about what had happened the previous play. But it's like if that game continues to escalate in the second half, the chances that Ja could end up getting a second technical just increased and he would get kicked out of the game. Obviously, he kept everything in check in the second half. Didn't really even need to play all that much because it was a blowout. But yeah, I was a little nervous in that moment there because we were getting some awesome NBA basketball between LeBron and Ja.
So as we talk today, all we know is it was listed last night was that his return was doubtful with a hamstring injury. Is that right?
Yeah, he sat on the bike. He wasn't pedaling the bike in the tunnel
Okay.
during the game, and he was limping in the locker room afterwards. So
Just literally as we've been recording, news came out. I don't know if you saw this, that Tyrese Maxey, Philadelphia, the aforementioned Tyrese Maxey, Sixers guard, is expected to miss a couple of weeks with a right hamstring injury. So, like, this is the kind of thing Jared Jackson missed some time with a mild hamstring strain. So I'm not trying to be alarmist here, but I don't know. I would assume that John Morant, in some form or fashion, will appear on the injury list for the next game. Whether that's out, doubtful, or questionable, he'll be on the injured list.
I don't think there's any debate on that. Like, I hope he will 100% be on the injury list, I think. But what I would say is the fact that he was listed as doubtful and not out to return to the game is positive. That is definitely a positive. Do I think he'll play on Friday against Washington? I would consider that to be doubtful, just because you got to remember you've got a 3-game road trip coming up after that with 2 games on national TV. So I doubt Ja's going to be playing on Friday if he's got the chance to be healthy for those games. So we'll see what happens. I mean, like you said, sometimes these hamstrings are tricky. It could be a couple weeks. That could happen here.
They did get Luke Kennard back, so that's helpful to soak up some minutes on the perimeter.
Vince Williams Jr., we got a return to play date, which I think was a positive update. I believe that was 2 to 4 weeks on Vince.
Yeah,
he has rejoined the team in practice and shoot around, which is positive to see. So obviously Vince is now getting his ramp up to get ready to come back this season. Where does Vince fit now? Now that you've got Jalen Wells, what happens if all 3 of those guys are healthy? Wells, Smart, and Vince Williams Jr.
With or without Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart back, right? That's sort of.
I forgot about Desmond Bane.
What Vince did last season was super impressive. It was not in the context of playoff race basketball. So that's the only sort of note of caution there, right? He's not proven it in a different setting. But I think what he did last season was so persuasive that I would play him ahead of Jalen Wells and Gigi Jackson. If all 3 were healthy today, my pecking order would have Vince Williams at the top of it, and I would probably have Vince Williams starting. I think the level of defense, Jalen Wells has been impressive defensively. I think Vince Williams showed a whole different level of defense last season. And then you factor in, the rebounding, some of the other stuff. I'm pretty high on Vince, but I'll allow he hasn't shown it in this kind of context yet.
Where does that leave Marcus Smart?
I mean, I think if everyone was healthy, Marcus Smart would be starting, at least for now. With Bane and Smart, you see where it goes. I wonder about by the end of the year. I feel like, especially with Bane there, I think Vince, even if you're talking about a Vince Williams, Jalen Wells decision, I think when Desmond Bane is there, I think that leads even more towards Vince in terms of starting next to Dez. If Dez is out, it may lean more to Jalen Wells to give you that shooter next to Ja. But I think if Ja and Bane is your backcourt, I just feel like the best, and again, we talked about this earlier, you wrote about it effectively, the best lineup versus the best rotation is a different question. But I think the best lineup by the end of the year is going to be a Vince Williams in that lineup.
No, yeah. I would agree. And you know what? I think I like Vince, but it's just where I get lost in trying to sort all this out is if Luke Kennard is healthy and Desmond Bane is healthy and Marcus Smart and Vince Williams are healthy, how is Jalen Wells going to get on the floor? Because Jalen Wells has to be on the floor. Like, you can't. I feel like you can't be sitting him out of
Yeah.
NBA games. You've got to make room for him.
Well, one thing that could happen here is they're playing Santi Aldama at small forward right now. So, like, how's that going to change as guys come back, right? Does that shift him more? But I think he's been pretty good at small forward. And so, I mean, the reality is we talk about this stuff in this, this make believe context in which everyone is healthy at the same time. And
Yeah.
when's the last time that happened, right?
Yeah, you're right. We shouldn't even think about everybody being healthy. That should be outlawed.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it'll be fascinating to see what Taylor Jenkins does. Best wishes to him. Unfortunate news about the death in his family. So that'll do it for us this week. We will be back next week to talk more Grizz. They'll be on their West Coast road swing. I think we got Portland, LA, Golden State next week.
Yep.
Couple fun matchups. Lakers again. That'll be fun to see. I'm sure Ja's going to get some reaction in that building after what he had to say last night. So that should be a very intense one. But that'll do it for us. Make sure you go check out everything over at the Daily Memphian. Go read about Jay Huff. Go read about Chris's reaction to the game last night and his column on some of the backup guys on the Grizzlies. And go listen to every other Daily Memphian podcast. For Drew and for Chris, we're out of here.